Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. I will open by quoting von Moltke on Boardgames. No book of rules extends with any certainty beyond the first contact with the purchaser of the game. This is often boiled down into the more famous phrase, no rulebook survives contact with the players, and that is a board gaming fact. What happens when you misunderstand the rules? Oh, that's not as bad as the game designer's misunderstanding of the rules. Every board game has a troubled production history. Some games are more troubled than others. There are a few games on the shelves that went to print with broken rules. The main culprit is often an earlier rule set, developed in testing, that accidentally survives in fragments scattered across a supposedly updated rulebook. I can think of 2 games on my shelves that fell victim to that horror. The internet catches the mistakes and lets you know why your game isn't quite working the way it is meant to work. In one case, card text was updated. The main rules reflected this update. However, the example of play used the earlier text on the card, and this made for a lot of confusion. Publishers have a responsibility to use clear text, clear writing, and clear design. It's vital to avoid clutter, ambiguity, and frankly, unreadable fonts. Even the best games will come with gremlins of vagueness crawling over their rulebooks. What happens when you misinterpret the rules and the game carries on just fine anyway? Nothing, provided you never find out. And if you discover the error, you fix the problem if possible. Unless the game worked really well with your accidental alteration to the rules and is now broken when using the rules as handed down from the mountain on 2 stone tablets. Hearty congratulations. For a few seconds you became an accidental game designer. Rules won't always lead you astray by themselves. Typos and ambiguity on game boards can steer you away from the path. I keep returning to an example of a board that conspired with the rules to eliminate a threat to players in that neck of the woods. This frustrated one player who attempted to enforce a penalty on anyone nearby when the shit went down. But when it came to reading the rules, we saw that the shit wouldn't go down. It bobbed in the river and floated away. We all had the vague sense that the rule wasn't written with the game board in mind, or that the game board hadn't been designed to match up to the rule. Within the first few words of unfurling the proclamation, the reader was shut down. It says here, blah blah blah. No, that doesn't apply. Wait a minute, there are loads of paragraphs to this. So, the first bit doesn't apply. But, doesn't apply. We humoured the player and toiled to the end of these paragraphs. That lost soul looked up, blinking in the sudden dawn of realization. The first bit didn't apply, and we escaped the non-looming threat. Something was off, but we never crawled to the bottom of it. Advice to game designers. If you have the option, and by fuck you have the option, tell us what a thing is, rather than what it isn't. If you find yourself using a double negative in a rulebook, your rulebook is not unworthy of destruction in the flames of hell. Here's a rule for gaming. It's a damn good rule. Apply it. Thank me later. It is the hot water rule. During any rule dispute, boil a kettle. When the kettle boils, end the dispute and move on. Life's too short for that shit, and we're all here to play the game. No one turned up at that table to die of boredom with a head buried so deep in a rulebook that a tombstone was set above the befuddled brain. Search and tangle tree roots for clarity on your own time. 5 minutes of rules filtering is eternity in game years. What if you can't agree on a rule? Abandon the game, drive to the nearest sea, wrap the box in chains, drop it off a cliff, and find a game worth playing. Suppose you realize you've run a rule front to back in mid-flow. What to do? Up until that point, everyone lived under the same flawed stars in the sky. Here, the complexity of the game's layout will guide you. If applying the rule right way round is a quick fix, fix it quick. You can all rewind one game turn and move forward into a brand new day. Alternatively, with 1,000 playing pieces on the board, you might no longer have the will to live or be physically capable of lifting half a metric ton of wooden components, so apply the rule from the next turn. You might just realise that the game shatters under the revelation of truth as it breezes in from a troubled sky. Start afresh, or drive the game to the cliffs and start afresh. I was playing a card game, not one purchased for this channel, new to it, trying to follow the ebb and flow of play. Not really attempting to win, just getting a feel for how the game played. Quickly, I was in this unassailable lead. Another turn and my unassailable lead multiplied. I'd used no strategy. Nothing of intelligence went into the moves I made to indicate that I was on a winning streak. Yet there I was, rolling my snowball into an avalanche of victory. I stopped the game and said that if a new game feels wrong, then it's through applying a rule very badly. Sweeping the cards away and shuffling them, preparing a new game, I checked the order of play. That felt like the culprit. Within a minute, I saw the order of events was so messed up that it triggered a ridiculous advantage for the lead player. And I'd been the lead player in that game for the simple reason that I was teaching the bloody game. I'm supposed to know what we're doing, so I'll go first. Oh, I've not taught the game at all. A quick reset, sticking to the correct order of actions, gave us a game that flowed. Colour me stunned. I'd read the rules multiple times, and I read them again the day before I played the game. My reading was late at night, and I felt I knew what was required to kick the game into action. I had the rules to hand as a reference while I taught the game. If you get no complaints or questions, you dive in and play the game. It doesn't mean you'll play it right. The mistake with the order of card action rolled over and died. A frustrating experience was, thankfully, a short-lived one. Gameplay in the right order was fun. That's the point. It's important to make mistakes. The more games you play, the easier it should be to spot mistakes. Unfortunately, the more games you play, the greater the risk of importing a rule from one game into another by accident. I've seen that done in role-playing games, and it's always been amusing. Speaking of role-playing games, let's have another example. The RPG is a world unto itself. You can play with a misunderstood rule for years and not notice. In an RPG, you have a character who faces doom at every turn. Bluntly, the character has hit points, a damage total, a health bar, or whatever you want to call the survival factor in play. We knew one gamer who developed the awful habit of miscalculating the hit point system for every new game he bought. It wasn't enough to screw up our hit points in one set of rules. No, he was on a mission to reduce our survivability straight out of the gate in any and all game systems and settings he laid hand to. In one notorious case, he changed the hit point system of a game from week to week, so that we recalculated our hits based on the phases of the moon, the reading of chicken entrails, or whatever high-pitched sound only he could hear wailing in the streets far beyond our senses. Our character's vitality veered wildly from session to session. We weren't characters, but hospital inmates growing steadily worse for wear as the adventure unfurled before us. There was one more correction, and we all suddenly grew better. Though I hasten to add, this doesn't mean he finally got the rule right. He simply opted for consistency thereafter, right or wrong. However you handle the rules, do handle them. Read the rules thoroughly, repeatedly, and be prepared to muck up your card game from the get-go. If you notice a rule being played wrongly, go for the quick fix. Boil a kettle to settle rule disputes. Make use of online advice. Always go with what the game designer says in this shit list of corrections. Creating your own house rules is a topic unto itself. House rules, variations on the game played under someone's roof, all have the same overriding rule to them. It is this: explain your local rule variation to new players before you begin. Many a murder charge is avoided by sticking to this one. But I left the most important rule until the end. You are there to have fun playing these games. Whether abstract, thematic board games, card games, role-playing games, doesn't matter. Have fun. If you aren't having fun, you've failed to understand the rule. Or you've been lumbered with a shit game. You decide which. Did we get a rule wrong? And did we still have fun? For millions of years, we played an RPG called RuneQuest. When we came to the end of it, exhausted, done, we played one last game with that group of players. Now we weren't to know this was the last game with that group. To us, this was just one more adventure session. We sat down and went through character creation. One player mentioned a point about character creation that surprised me. I turned and looked at the page. There it was. And this point sat on that page unnoticed for years. It had the capacity to drastically alter the way players created their characters if they opted to go down that path. Yes, we'd been playing it wrong for years, and this only came up in our last game. I hold out the vague notion of an opportunity to play the game again. Last game or not, we had a hell of a lot of fun in all those games before we knew there was another better way to apply a rule. We'd applied the rule of having fun.